Hello,
Yep.
stranger. Long time no see.
I know, I'm finally back. And I found out you're in 50-degree weather right now.
Is that right?
I
Yep,
just asked
51 degrees.
Alexa, you know what
51
it is
degrees.
here this morning?
Uh, 48.
7.
7.
7 degrees Fahrenheit.
What?
Yes.
Wait a minute, where are you?
Camino Island.
You're in the state of Washington and it's 7 degrees?
In fact, the
Surrounded by,
high today is going to be 22.
is the Pacific Ocean frozen? Actually, no, it won't freeze until 0. Well, it's salt water.
So I think this is the low, a record low since I've been here.
I would say so. 7 degrees in the Pacific coast of Washington? That's really weird.
Global extremism.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, we're having very high variability, high variance weather.
I think it's also only the second winter since I've been here that all the way up until Christmas, it hasn't snowed. Then it did snow like 2 days ago.
Yeah, we didn't really have any snow until after Christmas either. I mean, there was like maybe an inch in the middle of December that didn't really count.
Anyway, yeah, yesterday the high was like 17.
Wow.
Today the high is going to
Unbelievable.
be 22. It's not going to be
Unbelievable.
above freezing until about Tuesday, they say.
Wow, strange.
I don't know.
Don't worry, you'll get it soon, Barry. It's just cold snap coming over.
Tuesday, my friend Nancy in Utah is having a snowstorm, a blizzard, I think, and I think it's due to arrive in New England on Tuesday afternoon, if I remember right. Don't know how much of the East Coast will get it, whether it's just New England. Stacey can tell us if it's going to be in the Carolinas.
I'm in New York now. I'm supposed to fly out on Tuesday, so I don't
yeah.
know what's going to happen.
Are you going to go back to the Carolinas?
No, I'm supposed to, I mean, I am, but not on this trip. I'm supposed to fly to Florida, but
Oh,
I'm hoping it's going to be light and I'm going to make it. But
what day are you flying?
Tuesday,
What time of day?
1:50.
In the afternoon.
Yeah,
That's right on the edge of when it's going to be snowing. But if you're lucky, it won't have
we'll see.
deposited very much yet. I think you're a little west of me.
I'm not good with geography. So what are we doing today?
Well, we're doing without Sam Chan today. That's one thing we're doing.
He's got some family stuff, or what's he doing?
He wrote that he is teaching an off-site course today. Didn't say anything more than that. But he's got to go someplace to lead a course in something or other.
That's my favorite course. The course in something or other.
Right. We're here to talk about anything you want to talk about. What do you want to talk about?
No, the only ask I had is that we keep practicing Bohemian dialogue, and since we're recording, we get it on the record that we are here to practice Bohemian dialogue.
Oh, right. That's the unfulfilled objectives, Bohemian dialogue.
I'm trying to fulfill it.
Well, that means we have to find our frontiers and negotiate them.
No, we've already talked it to death. I'm just saying, any new people that come or anyone that's listening, it's an underlying principle, and I think we're supposed to hold each other to it if we're not listening.
Yeah. Yep, I suppose so.
Yeah. I had a nice talk yesterday with not every Friday, but we have this ontology club on Fridays on a Clubhouse, and it's a nice group of people trying to categorize the world, if you will. And it's when you frame the conversation of ontology, it leads to sometimes kind of dry but very interesting conversations.
Ontology. The question is, what is there? And the answer is everything. Basically, the short definition of ontology.
Sure, sure. That's acceptable in the club if you want to say everything.
I think that was in Smolyan's book when he introduced the word ontology. He said, ask the question, what is there? And the answer is everything.
Yeah, that's simple ontology.
Interesting question is, what isn't there and why not?
Yeah, well, it bled over from the week before, but the topic was a murder of one, semantics, lexical versus semantical.
A murder, oh, like a murder of crows.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
it's the wrong, it's a oxymoron, I guess. Murder has to be at least 3.
yeah. They broke up 6 different ways of classifying that sentence, a murder of one.
Well, if you don't take murder as the definition of a group, just as the ordinary noun,
Mm-hmm.
you say, well, yeah, it's a homicide.
Yep.
Single victim.
Or if you're killing the number one.
I don't know that it makes any sense to kill an abstraction like the number 1.
Well, we don't need it anymore. We just start with 2 now.
Although the word kill is used very metaphorically, like I remember when I worked in a TV studio and you have, besides the regular cameras, in the studio, you have the slide projector for, slides. And the same device that showed slides would also show the movies. You have a movie projector and slide projector, actually 2 movie projectors and a slide projector into a mirrored multiplex, so you could pick one of 3 sources onto the kinescope. And sometimes the director would say, kill slides on 1. And he'd turn off the slide projector and maybe go to start the movie projector or something. So yeah, kill
Right.
basically can be used, not like murder, but just discontinue.
Yeah, don't go down the road I went last night. The ontology, you just, and then conversation just keeps going from all different ways of classifying everything.
I'll tell you, using words metaphorically is so bloody confusing because a lot of your audience will think you're using the word literally when you're using it metaphorically. And then even if they know you're using it metaphorically, they won't understand how to construct the metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah, the big joke of the night was man walks into a bar, orders a pint of beer and a pint glass.
And a what?
A pint glass.
Pint glass.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an ontology joke. Yeah. It's just you have to specify that you need a glass to drink it out of, otherwise they just pour the beer inside.
Well, they could just give you the bottle of beer. Why? You say in a pint glass as opposed to in a bottle.
Meaning you've got to specify that you want a pint of beer that is located inside of the properties of a cup.
Okay.
It's a bad joke. It's terrible. Anyway, how is Taiwan? Did you have a good trip, Sam?
Oh, it's having had an election. Yeah, Sam can explain the 3 parties and the politics of the election that just happened, because I don't understand what was about.
Also, it can't be done briefly.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't even
complicated.
understand all of it.
There are 3 parties with different connections either to the policies of China or the policies of the US or the policies of the mayors of Taipei. And I don't quite understand. And also the Chinese military is in the loop, and it's very complicated.
I'm fascinated if Stacey's interested.
I can just give you kind of a personal slant on this. And I, not claim to be any expert on the objective, although I've been aware of it for the last 40 or 50 years, but it's still very complicated. But if some of you have been hearing about as Barry says, the 3-party race going on, and in fact, it's probably already decided. I haven't even looked at the
Yeah, it was announced, but I don't remember which party won. or even
Look
which
that up
party
first.
stood for what
Stories.
principles.
Main opposition party concedes defeat.
Opposition to
Ruling
what?
parties, Lai Ching-te wins Taiwan's president. Okay, good. This is good news. Okay. All right. So let me tell you a couple of stories. So what the news is saying about the three-party system, the Kuomintang, the KMT, that's the group that came over from mainland China. And I think
That's the Chiang Kai-shek contingent.
yeah, the derivatives of Chiang Kai-shek and his ilk. And then there's the DPP. By the way, the KMT, Kuomintang, that's typically referred to in Taiwan as the Blue Party. And the DPP, the Democratic something or other, that's the Green Party. And those are the more native Taiwanese, not the ones that have been here only since 1947 or 49. That's the set of people that pretty much came over around the 1700s and have really been called the Taiwanese. And they, in fact, are not even the native Taiwanese who are the Aborigines, but there's only a couple 100,000 of them, and they live up in the mountains. And then there's this third party, which I don't know very much about. But the personal slant I know about this, and I learned about this just recently since I was in Taiwan, is that Lai, the vice president who became president, he was vice president under Tsai Ing-wen, who was the previous president. He's relatively young, and he's actually trained as a medical doctor. And his advisor / teacher was my uncle, my third uncle in Tainan.
Oh.
And my uncle recounts a conversation that he had where Lai came to him and said, hey, give me some advice. You've been around for a long time. I'm just starting out, tell me how to be successful and whatever. And my uncle told him, Taiwan, Asian cultures, we have a lot of good doctors. We value doctors. We train a lot of good doctors. We have a lot of good doctors. What we don't have are honest politicians.
Who does?
So he said, if you really want to make a difference, go and be an honest politician. And that's why he went into politics. And so in my uncle's garden in Tainan, there's a tree. It was planted in 2018 or, some 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it's a picture of Lai and my uncle and 2 other people. And this picture on a post is next to a tree which Lai planted in my uncle's garden. And I have a picture of that. I can share that when I find it. So anyway, there's a personal connection. It's probably not surprising since my family and especially my uncles have been on the island. They're both in their late 80s. That uncle number 3 is 89 now. And he's still practicing, by the way. He still sees patients every day.
Wow.
He still wears his doctor's, lab coat, and he's got a stethoscope around his neck, and he still sees patients every single day. And the island is only like 23 or 24 million people. So it's way smaller than even California. It's, I think, half the size of California, way smaller than the US. So they've been around. They're, both my older uncles there are on the faculty of National Taiwan University, and they've been there for quite a while. The uncle that I'm speaking of is also on the board of the Taiwan YMCA and has been there for like, I don't know, 50 or 60 years. So they support various different initiatives on the island. Oh, and one other thing he does, this is started by my grandfather. My grandfather, I think, was on the board or was the chairman of a all-girls vocational high school in Tainan. And so when my grandfather passed away, my uncle took over or was elected to that position. And he's held that position also now for several decades. So he's done a number of different things to help out different initiatives on the island. So he's somewhat well known. And then my uncle number 4 is on the, anyway, I won't get into too much. Anyway, that's the personal slant on this whole election. So most of the native Taiwanese, my parents and that whole group most of the island, to 20 million plus. They don't want to go back to be quote unquote reunified with China because for a century and a half, close to a century and a half, it was never part of China, except for briefly right after World War II. But that was not a good experience. And even that China doesn't exist. So it's a tenuous situation because China says they're going to take over the island. US has not officially recognized. In fact, it was Nixon who did this way back in the 70s. He cut formal diplomatic ties with the ROC, which is the government of Taiwan, because he was, cozying up to the Chinese. So since the 70s, Taiwan has not been a member of the United Nations and has also not been formally recognized by the United States, even though we have a formal treaty with whatever it is Taiwan is, we meaning the US, a mutual defense treaty. So that's why whenever China sends missiles over Taiwan, US sends a carrier group into the South China Sea, and tensions get high. Anyway, that's probably more than you wanted to hear. That's the personal slant on the recent election in Taiwan.
Thanks for sharing. How's your family doing with the move?
I kind of predicted this. When I heard about this, number one, I support my parents going over there and spending their last years, in Taiwan. They've wanted to do this for decades. However, when I finally went there and saw it, it's a sad situation. I mean, the place is decent. It's clean. It's well lit. There's lots of nurses on the staff, but their room is 2 single gurneys.
Oh, no.
A bathroom, a window, and that's it. A small closet. There's not even a desk. Okay. So when I got there, my mom had just bought a desk. It was one of these IKEA type. It wasn't IKEA, but it was like that, so I had to cut it open, and my daughter and I put it together for her so that she could actually sit at a desk and write letters. She preferred not to use her iPad for writing letters. She prefers to write them out by hand. But just like yesterday or 2 days ago, and by the way, I said, this is not a great situation, and in fact, it's even worse. They can't even leave the facility since they're both 91 unless someone signs them out and then signs them back in. Okay. And that has to be arranged the previous day. So it can't be last minute. So they don't trust 91-year-olds to go out into town, do whatever they want to, and come back reliably. Okay. So anyway, they've arranged every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they go to my uncle's hospital, where he has a nice little family wing to the hospital. And they spend the day over there, and they see friends and see my uncle. They do whatever they want. And then they go back to sleep there. But me seeing this, I said, you're not going to last. I said this to my dad, you're not going to last here. It is going to make you crazy. And sure enough, not yesterday, but I think the day before, I got an email from him saying, we are going to move. So on February 16th, they're moving into another facility. It's another senior care center. But at least this one, they're going to have a kitchenette. They're going to have a TV. They're going to have, it'll look like a real apartment, as opposed to this small little hospital room in this big intensive care facility. And
Will they be allowed to leave when they want?
I think that will be possible in this new place. I'll have to check with that. But I have a regularly scheduled call with them, usually on Sunday night, my time, which is Monday morning, their time. And last week, I think I was traveling. I was flying on the plane to California at that time last week. So we were exchanging emails. So this Sunday, I'll be able to talk to them real time and see how it's going.
What did they do with the property in Hawaii that they were living in before?
They had a ping pong table, so occasionally they would play ping pong. My dad was still, watching. They love watching Japanese news. They watch Japanese news, and my mom watches Korean soap operas, and also Taiwanese TV shows. Usually these. It's kind of like a soap opera. It's a series, on TV.
So did they own their residence in Hawaii and then sell it, or what did they do with it?
So my mom owns a condo in Hawaii, and my dad owns a townhouse in Irvine, and both have appreciated nicely. However, neither was really a cool situation for both of them to get together. So, long story brief, they lived in a house in Honolulu that was owned by my uncle in Taiwan. He owns about 3 or 4 houses in Honolulu. He owns about 20 houses in Indiana. It's another long story there too. So he let my parents rent two floors of that house, and the lowest floor is actually a different family. And it actually turned out to be nice because that family was much younger and they were helping my parents whenever my parents needed them.
So they didn't actually own that property. They just rented it from the uncle.
Right. They were renting it from my uncle, but they were renting out the other 2 properties to other people. So basically it was a wash, it was a net zero.
But what about the furnishings? Did they have their own furnishings that wouldn't
Yes,
fit?
they did. In fact, this is one of the reasons I went to Hawaii in November, because my mom and my dad, they've collected a number of things. There were some, especially my mom's piano, which is now
Right. Yeah, you have the piano.
right. But there also is a very nice, you would think of it as a coffee table. It's a low table. It's a
Yeah.
Japanese coffee table, but it's actually a Japanese dining table. Japanese eat on tatami mats on the floor.
Right. Yeah, you sit
And
it.
so these tables are only like, I don't know, 13, 15 inches off the floor. But US, obviously, culture doesn't treat that as a dining table. So my mom loved that table. It's beautiful, it's very nice wood. But while in Taiwan, as they grew older, one of her very good friends built a supporting platform for it. It's basically a folding platform, and it basically is sized exactly correctly to make that little table a regular writing table, like 30 inches off the floor or something like that. Okay. So I got both those items because my mom, it was a personal gift and handcrafted by her friend.
Oh,
So she wanted me to take that one. There's 2 pieces of Taiwanese furniture that she wanted me to have that they got all the way from Taiwan. And then there's 3 tatami mats. I don't know if you guys know what tatami is. My cat is named Tatami, but tatami is a sleeping surface / flooring surface that's bamboo based. I think it's bamboo based. I'm pretty sure it's bamboo based. And it's like 3 feet by 6 feet. And it's the standard way you measure real estate in Japan. And it's also what you normally sleep on in Japan. You would actually, roll some blankets out and sleep on a tatami floor. That's how you sleep. And that way there's no bed permanently taking up a lot of space. So my parents have adopted that habit as well. And let's see, there's a couple other items. I forget exactly what else. Oh, it's about 5 of my dad's books. My dad, he wrote 6 books, over the last 30 or 40 years. And he's collected every other book and paper that's referenced his work.
oh,
He's got
wow.
5 boxes of it. Okay. So again, he was going to toss it all out, but I thought, hey, we should keep this. So I got that. It's now here. Anyway, there's a bunch of things. I couldn't take most of this. They were in possession of a pretty nice ping pong table. I didn't bring that here. What else? Anyway, so I went over there and tried to retrieve and move whatever I could so that they didn't have to give it away. Bunch of photos also.
So now they're much smaller quarters and
Yes.
without all that furnishings.
Yep.
And they're both 91.
They're both 91. In fact, my mom is 1 month older than my dad, but they're both 91.
Oh, they're very Zen people to give up all that possessions and go back to Taiwan.
I think when you're 91, you got to make some choices, and they've probably made them over decades. So they're probably
Yeah.
already done with
But
those.
you have, how many uncles are there now in Taiwan?
My dad was born one of 11 children, and I
Wow.
think 1, 2, 3, 4 have passed away. So he's one of 7 surviving.
And they're all in Taiwan?
No, most of them are here in the US. 2 of them are in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Actually, 3 now, including my dad. And my mom was one of 5 children. And there's only 2 of them left.
Oh, but still, they have a fair number of siblings right there in town.
So I have 24 cousins on my dad's side,
Jeez.
and probably close to a dozen, perhaps. Actually, quite not that many. At least half a dozen on my mom's side.
Do you think that was a smart move for them to go back to Taiwan and not just stay in Hawaii? You do.
They're much happier in Taiwan. They miss
They
the
are.
They want to be with my dad's two brothers, and my mom has a surviving sister-in-law. Her brother actually passed away, but the sister-in-law and that family she's still very close to. So yeah, they're much happier in Taiwan.
Well, that's good.
They know the risk of China, and war, but they're comfortable with it.
So when you go there, where do you stay with your uncle? Where do you stay?
I stay in various hotels. I have
Stay in
Hilton,
hotels.
so I use Hilton points mostly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think if your father's in real estate, he would have lots of quarters available. No,
He's not in real estate. He's actually a medical doctor. He just picks up properties because the reason he has a bunch of places in Indiana is because his oldest daughter is Indiana, went to Indiana University, majored in music. So he bought her a house, and eventually, property values are so inexpensive that he just collected a bunch of places and rents them, and she manages that for him.
Oh, so she's the property manager on his
She's the
behalf.
property manager, yeah.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, so Taiwan is always in this precarious course of wanting to be independent, but never declaring independence, not to piss off the Chinese and not to, drag the US into a war. So US doesn't want Taiwan to declare independence because that for sure, according to China, will provoke war. And then that for sure means US will get involved in a war. So it's been this way for 50, 60, 70 years.
So since the previous vice president is now president, so that's sort of a continuation of the same regime. Does that mean the détente, the status quo, will continue, or do you think China's going to start rattling sabers again?
Well, China will do China will do something regardless. They're going to test his resolve, but it's probably the safest route forward.
Yeah. So who stands ready to defend Taiwan if the Chinese military starts to become invasive?
Taiwan themselves, South Korea, Japan, Australia, Thailand, and the United States.
Oh, so they have a fair number of allies. And also, don't we have a fair amount of commercial investment, technology industries in Taiwan that would be affected if
at some
China...
point, and it might still be true, the largest foreign investment country in China is Taiwan.
Yeah.
Taiwan has a lot of investment, especially in manufacturing.
Isn't there a huge, is it a chip maker in Taiwan? That's
Yes,
part of their name, right?
Taiwan Semiconductor.
Yeah, I thought Taiwan Semiconductor was sort of the world leader in making semiconductors.
They have over 50% market share in complex silicon.
Yeah, TSC, is that their
TSMC?
TSMC, Silicon Manufacturing Company. Yeah, yeah.
In fact, I had an interesting talk with one of my cousins. He said that many companies have tried to do this. The US has tried to do that technology. We at one point were the leaders. And is the leader in less complex semiconductors, memory chips, for example. But for complex GPUs, the most complex chips these days, Taiwan is by far the leader. Although there are, competitors being birthed, every year. But he was talking to me like culturally, he saw the advantage because the US, we have if you want to hear this, I'll give you 1 minute of it. The US has a capitalist system where all the profits go to the management and shareholders. In Taiwan, the culture is much more that you actually share profit with the employees.
Yeah.
So if you have a wafer that's got to go through 300 different steps over a period of 2 months before it can produce a GPU, and one of those steps, for whatever reason, let's say the oven was 1 degree off, or it was misplaced by a millimeter or whatever. For whatever reason, any of those 300 steps will screw the productivity of that entire 2-month process. And he says that if people are motivated to really, really attain high quality and resolve issues as the process is proceeding, that's the only way they get yield.
Yeah.
And he said, in his view, and he's very opinionated because he's biased, he's from Taiwan. He says other countries don't share their profits with their employees quite as well. So the employees don't have that motivation. At 5 o'clock, they go home.
Yeah.
Now, that's a very simplistic way of doing it, but that was his take on how the culture affects their position in this one particular industry. It's romanticized, I'm sure, but that was his.
Yeah.
Very
Bell
strong.
Labs was like that. I often did most of my work at Bell Labs after hours. Typically would stay there after the 5 o'clock closing time and just get my work done until about 10 p.m.
I mean, most people in software know you can't really do stuff until everybody else goes away. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But, I don't know who makes them, but I just bought some 64 gig micro SD cards off of Temu for like $4 a piece. They're practically free.
Micro SD, Korea, South Korea is very big in that. Obviously, Samsung, and then Japan, and then we still have some U.S. companies that I think build them, or at least U.S. labeled companies. They might be built elsewhere.
The downside, though, is that a lot of laptops can't use the SD card to offload parts of the operating system. The operating system has to be on the solid state drive. And if you put an SD card, it says, oh, that's nice. We're not going to use it for anything.
The OS has to be on a permanently mounted drive. Otherwise, you've got what's called a live OS, which is not what it boots from.
Yeah. And in fact, you can't even boot. You can't even boot. You can boot from a USB stick, but you can't boot from the SD card. It doesn't even, the BIOS doesn't even see it as a bootable item for a live boot.
You can typically tweak the BIOS for that.
Well, so the Dell laptops, there's no modified BIOS that will do that. So all I can do, it turns out all I can do with the SD card is offload personal files, which I don't really have any.
Which is fine. And by the way,
Pictures.
if you want to actually diagnose PCs, Barry, one of the best ways. You're taking off, Stacey? Sorry to monopolize the talk so far.
That's okay. I won't be here next week. Hopefully I'll be in Florida if I get out.
Are
Take care.
Safe travels.
Travels.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Barry, since you diagnose a lot of machines,
Yeah.
you take a USB drive and put a live OS, like any flavor of Linux on it. You can then do pretty much anything you need to on a faulty laptop and diagnose it.
Yeah. I've been playing around with a Dell Mini Inspiron, 11-inch Dell Inspiron, a tiny little thing. But it's only got a 30 gig MMC drive in it, which is not big enough for the current version of Windows. You could install the 2016 edition of Windows, but after that, there wasn't enough room to upgrade it. And I've been trying to figure out, can I get around the limitations, or do I, because I'm not even sure that I can blow away Windows and put Chrome OS or Linux on it. I'm not even sure I can blow away the MMC.
Unless it's got EPROMs, you probably can.
Or NVRAM. Well, I'll have to check that out. But the thing is that the motherboard is UEFI, so you're kind of stuck. Even though you can go into legacy mode, it seems like when I try to put in Peppermint Linux, it couldn't overwrite the boot sector. Basically, ran into some kind of reason why, and I tried to install the grub loader, it wouldn't install the grub loader. And I got kind of a diagnostic message that I didn't quite understand.
Yeah. Anyway, the good news about this community is typically the community come up with a workaround for pretty much every scenario.
Yeah. Well, I'm still looking for work. There's a lady gave me these two 11-inch Dell Minis. They've only got 2 gigs of RAM, and even though they're 64-bit machines, they only got 2 gigs of RAM in them. And I think they're soldered in. I don't think I could open them up and put in a card.
It's a perfect case for Linux speeding up the machine.
Yeah, but I can boot off of a USB stick. But I couldn't get the OS X Chrome Flex to boot. It started to boot and then it gave up and rebooted, and I haven't figured out why. But if I could get Flex on that would be fine. Flex will work fine in a 30 gig hard drive. 2 gigs of RAM, or maybe not. Maybe it wants 4 gigs of RAM.
Linux can run in much less memory.
I know I can put the 2016 edition of Linux on these old machines. I put it even on a 1 gig machine, and it was fine.
No, you're talking about Windows, right? Linux can go on any version of Windows. Linux will take much less resources.
Yeah. What I don't know is whether Linux will do swapping on an SD card or not.
I don't know about that. It depends on the version. But you know, when I got involved in Linux, you could build, and I probably think you could still do it today. You could still build a kernel that would only be 768K of memory that would run in that much RAM.
Oh yeah, yeah. The system rescue will run on a gig of RAM.
Right. And that's way less than a meg, not just a gig.
And you could just about use the system rescue as an equivalent to
That's why I always
As-
carry a live OS USB. I can go anywhere and turn any machine into a machine I can use.
but not if it's on an SD card. It's got to be on a real USB stick. Don't ask me why.
Okay, so we've probably run that course of conversation into the ground. Hey, I was curious if you guys are willing just to humor me a little bit. Can you give me like 30 seconds to a minute on last 2, 3, 4 conversations with Eric and Sam and whatever? Did you guys cover anything interesting?
Well, I'll hand that over to Joshua.
Yeah, I wasn't on all the calls, so I mostly was talking to Barry the last 2 weeks. So the only interesting thing that I have is my ask for the new year, and the same ask that I've always asked is we keep this beautiful archive that we've created, and hopefully at some point this year have a reunion with as many people that have ever been on the calls and invite them to use the latest language models to sort through and mine for gold, mine for conversational gold, and to continue the Bohmian dialogue. I'm very much interested in keeping that as a theme, and been practicing it in other conversations. And I think it's something that's needed and asked for. A lot of people are asking for civil discourse. I watched this last week, a conversation with I think it was 4 pundits, Glenn Greenwald and Alex Jones, because they've now platformed him back on X. So he's back in the discourse. But watching people yell at each other, I think, is getting old. So that's my ask, is for Bohmian dialogue.
Yeah. What concerns me about Bohmian dialogue is that David Bohm himself tried it and essentially gave up.
I recall that part of the conversation, Barry.
Yeah,
No,
that's really all I have to say about it.
there's no
Well, that was
online
then.
reference
Yeah,
he
that was a while back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other reason that I'm really asking for this, Barry, is what I was talking about the other day, is the meme that's going on where aliens arrived in Miami at a mall, and we predicted that there will be some really weird, confusing people with AI. And what I'm finding, Barry, it's more. I did a little deeper dive after we talked. It's more TikTok that's confusing people, because people are lying and saying, I was there at the mall, this is what I saw, and you can believe that there was definitely interdimensional beings that appeared and everyone ran away. And then later they say, a couple days later, oh, actually, no, this never happened, which even fuels the fire more of what CIA PSYOP got to them and told them not to talk about the aliens. So I just think this is the tip of the iceberg. This is one of the first large events to go viral, for many, many, many more to come this year. It's going to be a year of, did that happen or did that not happen?
The real news is, because they've discovered so many exoplanets with the new telescopes, they now know that almost every star system has planets. And about a third of them have planets in the so-called habitable zone, where you could have liquid water. And now they think that the problem, if you do the Drake equation again, and some people have redone the Drake equation, that the probability has gone way up because of the increased probability of habitable zone exoplanets being far more ubiquitous than Drake ever thought back in 1961. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you get to intelligent life, only that you get to self-reproducing automata, organic
traveling life.
automata, which is viruses and bacteria and one-celled animals. And there was another discovery of a fossil representing the oldest fossil of skin. It was really old. Now they knew, of course, that that lizards and amphibians had skin, but at what point did a creature evolve where you have a sac made of skin that would contain a bunch of cells so that you could keep the water inside the skin and have other environments like air or bad water outside of it? And so they have this new oldest discovery of a fossil of skin. It was basically something like a lizard, and it's just a small piece of a fossil that they clearly have recognized as skin. And that seems to be, even though it happened a long time ago, if you can't get from living in water, where water is your environment, to living in a cell wall that keeps the liquid inside of a cell wall, that's a big obstacle for evolution to enclose the liquid. So they think that much more likely life will be like blobs, blobs that live in a liquid environment, and they can be goo, but they won't have skin and be mobile and be able to live in air. They think that's a much harder path to get a breakthrough on. And so very likely life will be, goo, slimes and stuff like that. The notion that aliens that look like hominids, upright on two legs and a head on top and eyes and all that stuff, they think that's much less likely than just very primitive, self-reproducing automata.
Yeah, the narrative of the alien story is morphing at an exponential rate in the last couple of years just because of the attention that they're putting on it. So the narrative is not that it's aliens. The narrative is that it's us from the future that can interdimensionally time travel. That's the big narrative.
I don't believe that. There's no evidence of time.
There's no evidence of any of this at this moment, but there's more than enough fantasy fiction going out.
There was a story. There's a new book out by a genuine academic looking at the the whole history of UFOs and aliens and all this stuff. And he said the very first published observation of an unidentified flying object, I think it was a military pilot, and he described what he saw as arcs or semicircular shaped, call them crescents. That was what he said. I saw these crescent shaped objects, and the journalists who translated his story into a published news story, they changed the word crescent into flying saucer.
What year was this?
I'm going to say it was probably in the 60s, but I'd have to go back and double check because I didn't carefully memorize that part. But here's the point. The person who first saw a crescent-shaped object in the sky that he couldn't recognize as a known aerial phenomenon called it a crescent. And the term flying saucer was introduced by a science journalist.
Right. This was 1940 in, I believe it was Seattle, in Washington State.
And this academic said within a year there were thousands of reports of flying saucers.
Yeah.
Yet one never used the term flying saucer. It was just a crescent-shaped, illuminated shape, like a curved cigar or something like that. But it's easy, I guess, to go from a curved cigar to an edge-on view of of a frisbee, I suppose.
Yeah.
Any,
Well,
there. So that was the point. And so a couple of programs on NPR, Science Friday, and one other one were interviewing this guy who's doing, real academic research on the origin of the alien stories and the flying saucer stories and the UFO stories, and the notion that an alien creature and a UFO are completely separate concepts. That a UFO doesn't have to have alien life in it; it could just be a machine. But in the popular press, a UFO is conflated with aliens, the hominid-shaped aliens.
yeah, yeah. That's like, to me, that was the dialogue in the 1970s, and then it's just the telephone game has gone crazy, and I think the trajectory of time positing into the future. So here we are in 2024. We're in the future now from those stories, but then the trajectory going into the past, all these Atlantis stories and ancient cultures and Egypt and blah blah blah, that keeps getting slanted with discoveries like Gobekli Tepe and all these new discoveries in the Amazon. So there's, in other words, we're expanding our view of time, and our lens is starting to get a more focused, where we're starting to see farther into the past and project farther into the future.
We're getting more reliable data from the past than we used to have.
Yeah.
Also, but both in cosmology with the James Webb and with archaeology, and using LiDAR, they have planes with LiDAR that can actually see through the canopy to the ground. Most of the reflected light is in the canopy, but 2 or 3% of it is gets through the canopy and back up through the ground, and they can eliminate the canopy digitally, and they can find the ground underneath the canopy. And in the rainforest, they have found settlements that you could not otherwise have seen using this LiDAR technology. That's
Yeah, and they're also finding it where they've been clear cutting out in Brazil, places that have just all of a sudden, wait a second, let's look here. Oh my goodness, this is an ancient city.
Yeah, so they're finding the remnants of ancient cities where you would not have found them before by walking on the ground in the rainforest.
Yep, and I really do believe they predicted. If you guys remember the turn of the century in 1999, that around this time we would reach a singularity. I think it's happening from what I see. I don't know what you guys is. I'm curious of your perception of.
I guess it depends on how you define singularity. I don't know if I would go with Kurzweil's concept of a singularity, because lots of singularities is basically a one-off transition event or passage, like a diode event. But I mean, the AI singularities, I think that's kind of hyped, the AI singularity. The age of spiritual machines, which is Kurzweil, I think that's maybe a little bit hyped. But
the breakthroughs in the protein folding, is that hyped?
I haven't seen any recent stuff on protein folding other than the fact that that it's computationally intense to try to find or try to model protein folding. That there was a project to use idle computer time to solve. It was like the Enigma machine and protein folding were two of the activities that you could dedicate your idle computer time to. But I haven't really heard of any breakthroughs using that method. The breakthroughs really from the AI stuff. There was a breakthrough in identifying toxic substances by analyzing hypothetical structures.
Well, from what I'm seeing from lectures at different universities, there's breakthroughs in every dimension, from cellular biology to geology to crystalline structures to cosmology and to material science.
Not
What's
government, not governance and politics. We're not human politics.
Well, actually, there is. If you think of the word government, mint being mind, There's breakthroughs. There's a new TV that was just launched in Las Vegas at the CES show that's doing really intensive eye tracking.
Uh,
So if you're governing someone's mind, there's amazing breakthroughs in IR technology on the phones that scan your iris. So they're really understanding what people's minds are doing in terms of tracking their eye movements on
Yeah.
so many different platforms.
Human eye is very reflective in the infrared. If you illuminate somebody with infrared, the eyeballs are just bright as can be. They're the brightest spots you can see under infrared.
Yeah. I'm just saying there's a lot of breakthroughs in mind understanding, and there's a lot of new companies that are connecting the brain directly to the computer.
Yeah. So chipping the brain and things like that. There's some good work at the Media Lab on picking up brain signals and decoding them into actual spoken or written words.
Yeah.
There's a guy who can think ordering a pepperoni pizza and actually the machine will detect that and make the phone call and place the order.
Yeah, that was in, I think, what, 2014 or something?
That was it was maybe 10 years ago on
Yeah.
6.
Yeah, I'm saying that was cute in 2014. What they're doing now with advertising and the internet is really advanced. It's really amazing. They're predicting what you're going to look at before you look at it.
Sam, if you transfer host control from your original host to your new login, does that permit the cloud recording to continue or does it interrupt it?
Number one, it's not cloud recording. Number two, if I change host, in the past, I've seen it be interrupted.
Yeah.
And I don't see, I mean, I'm a co-host here on this device right now, so I've not claimed host, so I believe recording is still going.
The question I was trying to find a reliable answer to is if you start cloud recording with the original host and then that person relinquishes host and even leaves the meeting, does the cloud recording continue? That's what I wanted to find out. But
Yeah, originally when I started doing this, the answer was yes. The cloud recording continued, and so the file was intact. But I do believe at some point I've seen that fail, so I can't say for sure that it still works.
I know that recording on your local drive will fail if the person doing the recording disconnects. It has to, because they have no way to get the data. That's obvious. But cloud recording means it's coming from the Zoom center, and that should be able to continue in theory. But the question is, does it?
Yeah, I think when I started doing this, it did work as you described and as we intend. But I do know that sometimes that has failed. And I don't know whether that's due to product design or due to my storage limitations being exceeded.
Well, that's true. Your storage on the cloud was getting filled, wasn't it?
Right.
That could be the issue. The reason I'm asking is that Toastmasters, the guy who has the professional account, we have to record to the cloud on his account, but when he's not available, and I end up becoming the host for the duration of the session, does that continue to record without losing it? As far as I know, it does, but he's not gone that much.
Yeah, I would think in theory it does, and that's actually something that's quick to verify.
Yeah. Except I don't want to check in the middle of a meeting and then end up having the wrong answer.
Right. You'd have to do it before.
No, I didn't need to do it in a test.
Yeah.
Anyhow, not much else to report. Sam Chan and I basically do geeky tech talk on stuff that there was no point in recording it because nobody else would even care.
I'm actually surprised how much geeky tech talk you guys do.
Well, it's I mean, he's got this business where he's got all this surplus tech gear that's collecting dust, and he knows that if he sends me obsolescent gear, that I'll put it back into useful service to the best of my ability, or just hobby it to see what it can still do. And so it's worth it for him to send it to me. He's going to send me some monitors. He said he's got collecting dust.
I think that's the biggest growing business is upcycling of taking old gear and keeping it useful.
Well, that's what I'm basically doing. Is people want to retire their gear. I say, give it to me, and I'll, refurbish it to the best of my ability and sort of see to what extent it can be put back into useful service, and maybe even find a useful home. The problem is that around here, nobody wants a 2 gigabyte, 10-year-old computer, even if it's basically running, Chrome OS or something. I still can't necessarily find a home for it, but I can put it in the fix-it shop and have a, machine available there for the technicians to use to look up YouTube videos. But I don't need a lot of them, too.
I notice a lot of artists look for those type of things in mass, like old things that are going to get repurposed or broken down to use for art installations.
That's a good point. But maybe if I did a little research, I could find markets for this stuff and start giving away this old gear. A lot of it, I think, is just going to end up being a hobbyist project that doesn't actually go anywhere.
Yeah, maybe it'll end up in a lobby in some building.
Well, it's useful to have a publicly accessible machine in a lobby where people can just log onto the internet and not do anything drastic. Trouble is, these machines, you can hack them. I mean, you can't put in a USB stick and boot them. You can go into the setup and muck around with them. So they're not secure in an insecure lobby. You can't really lock them.
Yeah.
I guess you can put a password on the BIOS. I guess if you put BIOS, yeah, that's true. If you put a password on the BIOS, then you can. I never put password.
You could build a skin around it that sort of locks it in there. That's what I've been doing with my daughter, is taking old iPhones, grabbing a real strong OtterBox and giving them to her to throw across the room.
Oh, okay. I'll have to consider, putting a BIOS password on and then repurpose things for public use.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was a experiment in India where they just locked a computer in a corner of a town.
All right.
Just to see who would. Do you remember that experiment?
Yeah. 50 years ago.
Yeah, and it really made a difference to the kids in that town. They would run up and play with it, and
oh yeah, very creative and geeky. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of African towns like that now that would love to have those type of things.
I'm going to take a bio break for a few seconds. It's noon here, and I haven't had a bio break this morning, so I'll be right back.
Okay. Are your ducks and is everything okay with the freezing, Sam?
We have no more ducks.
Oh my
We
goodness.
lost our last duck months ago. So that part of the property is no longer a factor. But I still have 3 dogs, 2 cats, and they're inside. It's toasty inside here.
Water pipes okay, or
everything was good as of last night, so I'll have to check today.
Yeah,
we do have those faucet covers that sort of do a little bit of protection on the freezing.
It's that we've had a cold snap here that's lasted about a week and a half of being below. It warms up a little bit in the day, up to 40, but then it will go down to the 20s at night. So we got 2 snowstorms that melted and turned into sheet ice. So I had to chisel ice off the cars.
Yeah, that's wonderful, especially what that does to roads.
It's terrible. I haven't. We're running out of food up here, so I'm. Thank goodness for those delivery trucks, because they can get. I can't get down the driveway is what it comes down to. The roads are okay, but I can't. If I try to go down my driveway, it's so slanted. The car just spins and slides into the side, and I've already wrecked one of the cars.
So do those delivery vehicles deliver food down to the front of the property and you have to walk down there, or do they deliver it all the way to the house?
They've been trying to come up to the house and slipping and sliding. So I've been going down and meeting them. Yeah. But yeah, it's sort of I stocked up, we're eating like canned stuff, like we're eating canned chicken, and it's just not fun when you don't have fresh veggies.
And are you creating heat via gas, propane, or do you have some other way?
Propane. Yeah, we're doing propane. And
Yeah.
I just bought a generator, but I haven't bought the gasoline to put in it. And I was not prepared for this cold snap, but it now I'm prepared. Like I've got snow tires, those like chains that go around the tires.
Yep.
So we'll see.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
it's been quite the cold winter. It's just cold.
Well,
It's on the colder side.
do you have a propane delivery service that always checks your tank, or do you have to order it when you see it going low?
We have to order it when we see it going low. So I topped it off before this cold snap.
Yeah, I think I have one of the places here has a 500-gallon propane tank. This one here has a 250.
Yeah.
So they're typically sized to last at least half a year.
Yeah, I'm in the process of the place I used to live. The neighbor's house burnt to the ground, but their propane tank is still there, and I'm trying to figure out if I can use it. We end up buying their property, so now I'm stewarding. Like I'm overwhelmed. It was, we had I think 30 acres. Um, we had 25 acres, and then the neighbor's property was 50 acres. So now I have to steward another 50 on top of the 30, and it's overwhelming.
Oh, could be pretty nice once you get that all set up.
It'll be amazing. We're about 70% done cleaning from the fire, which was a lot of work. So there's giant heaps of metal that no one can come and pick up that's twisted and burnt up, like old four-wheelers and old trailers that just got burnt to the ground that are just, solid rusted metal. So I have dreams of I bought a pressure washer to pressure wash the rust off, but dreams of repurpose, we've got a couple welding machines now, so it'd be fun to do something with that metal, but right now we're just burying it under the ground. So I mean, in my ultimate dream, there's a gentleman I met in Massachusetts that's trying to produce electricity with a chemical process of aluminum by getting the aluminum hot enough. So if I had some sort of forge up there, that would be amazing, where I could melt down all the metal in place. But there's not enough the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah. Actually, so just to get a sense of it, how far are you from the closest gas station?
From that property that burnt down?
Well, from where you're sitting right now.
Oh, where I'm sitting, I'm about 20 miles away. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. They put one in town. We have a gas in 1.5 miles away.
Oh, okay. And town, 1.5 miles. Is that where the closest grocery store is?
The closest grocery store is 20 miles away from where I'm renting, but in the other place, it's an hour and 20 minutes.
Yikes.
Yeah. The other place is very remote, where you go over a mountain, come into a valley, and then go up another mountain. So that last little leg could be anywhere from 15 minutes if the road is nice, or 45 minutes, depending on what's washed out of a dirt road, going up all the way to 9,000 feet. So we're at 5,000. So it's because of the harsh terrain to get to that place, it keeps it pristine here in California, where no one even knows it exists. Like very few people know.
It's a good place for a witness protection program, it seems.
Great for a retreat center or rehabilitation from drugs and alcohol.
Chautauqua.
Yeah. So we're hoping, like, if you look at that Thich Nhat Hanh place in San Diego, that one day it'll be a place of retreat and contemplation and rejuvenation, and just you can look out over into the valley, you can see the stars, and it's butted against the national forest, so we know for sure no one will build upwards. And the property is actually cut right with the Bureau of Land Management, and I don't see that place being built up in the next 30 years. I don't, It's possible it could get a little bit if they pave the road, but paved it and put electricity up there. But I don't see that happening either. I don't see the county doing that for any reason. So hopefully it's one of those, those places right at the edge of civilization, like up in the redwoods. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's why I'm so big on making something for future generations, because if that place is going to last past my kids, grandkids, it'd be nice if they had the ability to log on to some old ass computer and go, wait, what were they talking about back then? Like, wait, this is before the big flood or the big war or the, you know what I mean? Like something that could be in a lead box somewhere running off of solar.
Have you talked to Avi yet about grandkids?
Have I talked to Ayana about grandkids?
Your daughter.
No, she just found out she had a bunghole. That was her big revelation this week, that she has a hole in her butt. So she came to me and said, wait, Daddy, do I have a hole in my butt? Is this true? Like, is this a real thing?
Doesn't she know what comes out of it every day?
She does, but at the same time, I don't think she knows the difference between pee and poop yet. She's not fully potty trained.
And she doesn't know about having babies yet either, I guess, huh?
She knows that there's babies in tummies.
Yeah.
So she used to joke about 6 months ago, she would take toilet paper and stick it in her shirt and say, look, I have a baby in my tummy.
Well,
So it's cute.
you can talk to her about having grandkids someday.
Yeah, well, that the whole point is that I'm hoping that some sort of semblance of society moves forward and it doesn't keep looping. Like I feel like we're caught in this massive loop that just we can't break out of.
It's called a hell loop.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, who's that writer producer? Forget his name now. Who did the series Lucifer on Netflix? I have to look up his name. I forget
Is
his
that
name.
Jerry Bruckheimer? I don't know who did that. One of those guys.
Anyhow, he in the series Lucifer, he had a version of hell where people who had gone to hell were stuck in a hell loop. They keep repeating the same uncorrected mistake that they made that cost them their life. And so he has this notion of a hell loop. And a hell loop is basically a recursion that doesn't ascend, but basically, so recursion that ascends is a helix. It slowly climbs out, but a recursion that stays on the same plane, goes around in circles and doesn't gain any ground in a new dimension is a hell loop. Untamed recursion.
Yeah, I've watched that series. It's a very well done series.
So people say I don't believe in hell. I say hell is just the old-fashioned metaphor for what mathematicians and computer scientists call an untamed recursion.
Well, you just reminded me in our last conversation, we didn't mention this, but Barry was mentioning this helix going up and then folding back upon itself, almost like some giant Manderbolt set in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, it's
I found that interesting.
Hey, if you think you're traveling in a straight line and you think you're in a straight line, but it's got a slight bias to it. And after a very long time, it loops back and closes on itself. But so a line is one-dimensional, but if it's got a slight bias, loops on itself, then it defines a circle in a plane. So now you defined a 2-dimensional space. So now you're going around the circle in a 2-dimensional plane, but if it ascends in a normal direction, there's a normal exit. So now you can have a loop that's actually a tightly wound spring, but it's not going straight up. It's sort of leaning to the side, and eventually it closes on itself like going around a donut. So now you have this helix that it closes on itself in a big donut, but now the donut itself can now be drifting sideways. And you can keep on doing this forever. Well, every time you add a new dimension, instead of moving linearly in the new dimension, it kind of drifts back on itself and closes. You can keep adding new dimensions indefinitely. But I don't know if anybody's ever tried to make an animation of that that's, that gets beyond maybe if I went to one of these new animation things and gave it that narrative, could it in fact turn a straight line into a circle, turn a circle into a spiral, turn a spiral into a donut, turn a donut into a meta donut?
I keep
Well, the
meeting
path.
people that are doing that. Go ahead, Sam.
Sorry to interrupt. I was about to say though that the graphics that are done of the sun and the Earth traveling through space kind of describes a little bit what you're saying, because you can think of the Earth going linearly, but then the sun is perturbing it, creating that circle. But the sun is traveling, so it creates that spiral. But then it's going around the galaxy, so it's actually got that other twist to it.
So the solar system going around the galaxy in a couple 100,000 years, I think, is the period, is already an example of that. But now, if you think of the galaxy itself is moving through space, so now this whole system is moving through space as the galaxy is moving sideways, and you can keep basically adding another dimension of motion perpendicular to the old subspace that you're in. And your dad probably would find this quite recognizable as a kind of a.
It's a simple n-dimensional description, from a mathematician standpoint.
Exactly. But from the point of view of the layperson, it'd be quite an epiphany, quite an amazing thing to imagine, an n-dimension motion, where every time you add a new dimension, that defines a new subspace. And that subspace has a new normal.
I was just going to say, I know we're not a psychedelic group, but in the psychedelic conversations, most people experience this when they close their eyes on psilocybin or DMT.
Yeah.
That's the interesting part of the brain, is that you're experiencing that traveling, and then your brain puts visuals to that, and then people draw that in art. And it's the Mayan culture. If you ever go to South America, there's some really interesting art on the walls and the hotels and on the streets, where people are depicting these dimensional states mathematically, but with colors. So it's very vivid colors in the culture.
You can do the same thing in music. You can have a musical beat, which is a basic theme, and then variations. So now the variations, but eventually the variations repeat. So now you have a new where the whole thing repeats, but then you can add meta variations. So you do it in one style of classical or jazz or Latin jazz, and you keep doing fusion. So that as soon as you get to a point where you're repeating, then you add a new dimension of perturbations in some new variation of musical, whatever the word is.
I'd love to show you. I've been working in that space the last 3 weeks. Of a friend of mine likes to take very bespoke instruments, which is one of them is called the mescaline. It's by a company called Folk Tech, and it's a circuit bending of sound running through so many different pots, relaying, where it creates these perturbations. And you can really, and he's just been for weeks, just he broadcasts all day long, him changing and bending the pitch of sound. And people come into these internet rooms and say, oh yeah, I've been doing this for years. And there's a lady that was on David Letterman back in the 80s who was doing this kind of work. And there's a whole subculture of people that take the Mandelbrot set and listen to it.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
So you can do perturbations on perturbations, meta perturbations on meta perturbations indefinitely. And fusion music is very much a demonstration of that possibility of some of the composers, it might have been Schubert, took classical and jazz and intentionally composed a piece of music that was a fusion between classical and jazz. And before that, or maybe at the same time, there were performers who were doing a jazz version of a piece of classical music. They would take a conventional classical music and interpret it with a bit of jazz perturbations. just to show you that you can mix the two and make them work together.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Jacob Collier?
No,
He's a famous artist that came on the scene about 10 years ago.
no.
His mom was a classically trained musician, and he just spent his childhood learning music to the point where he's breaking the notes into like quarter and 16th notes and finding harmonies inside of these 16th notes. So if you keep breaking it out past the chords, you hit another note, it turns into jazz. But if you hit another couple notes, it turns into these other. It's like I said, I don't want to go off on this, but it gets to the point where you start hearing resonances inside. So there's like 3 different things going on, but your brain can't comprehend all of them.
One over
But
S,
you can record them. Yeah, it's
all scales.
it's really fast. I can't explain it with words, but I could show you. I just bought a instrument from Moog called a theremin. Are you guys familiar with the theremin?
The theremin was invented by Leo Theremin in the 1920s, I think it was.
Yeah, he went insane into a sane asylum.
But you can, I mean, there are kits. People have built modern theremins with modern technology. It's much easier to build them today. You don't have to use vacuum tubes or some, awkward technology.
Well, I bought this one because it connects through MIDI and I think it's just MIDI. I hope it's just MIDI. I don't know. I'm gonna find out. But it connects to a software called Animoog, where you can take the Moog synthesizer and visualize the music on the screen. So I'm able to visually see and show with the theremin, and I just got it, but it's really fun. I don't know if you've never experienced. It was my first experience this week, putting my hand next to it and moving the notes, and then the sound. And when I'm going off, I thought when I went off and on the sound, it just would go up and down, but it actually quavering as I go closer with volume.
Vibrato, tremolo and vibrato with just little perturbations of your fingers of your hand.
It's really fun
to play the theremin. Not very many people good
and
at
you
it.
You get to calibrate it each time you use it to where you want the nearest pitch and the farthest pitch to be. So you get to change. It's like having a piano that you can it's the whole scale of the piano in this amount of space, or this amount of space, or this amount of space. So it's really fun.
Whale-sized piano versus the mouse-sized piano.
Yep. Well, yeah, just I don't know if you've ever played the piano on an iPhone, but it's kind of the same thing.
Plinka, plinka, plinka.
Yep.
We've bored Sam to tears, I guess.
No, I'm saying, this whole cross dissemination of classical and jazz and other genres is sometimes done well, sometimes done poorly. But jazz fusion has existed for decades. It kind of does a few of that. One of the first guys that did it, and I think well, was Claude Bolling, Bolling. Genius. Really, really excellent stuff.
Yeah. Then you got ragtime, so perturbing the timing of the beat, that was a big deal. Ragtime.
So syncopation has been around for a while. It's basically an evolution of syncopation.
I remember the syncopated waters. They had these water fountains, the colored water fountains that was syncopated to the music. So they played the music, and the fountains would keep time to the music and change. The lighting would change colors on the waters, and that was a big deal in the 50s. Syncopated waters.
Not synchronization, syncopation. It's different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were basically, one was following the other. The pulsing of the water fountain was following the beat of the music, or the.
Well, have you been to the Bellagio, Barry, in Las Vegas? It's a pretty good fountain dance.
They have one there. Been around since the 50s. Syncopated water shows. I mean, they're great to watch for an hour or two, and after that, there's really nothing sort of the awesomeness kind of wears off after watching them a few times.
I could be mistaken, but I think you're misconstruing synchronization with syncopation.
Well, the
Which
term
is it.
they called it syncopated waters. That was actual nomenclature for this dancing water show. Was called syncopated fountains. You can look it up. I remember that's why I learned the word in the 1950s, and I know the difference between syncopation and synchronization, where two things are exactly at the same time, but they're. Let me see if I can look up syncopated waters here.
While you're looking that up, I had a friend do the same thing, but with fire shooting out of propane tanks to classical music.
Yeah, same idea.
Same idea.
Okay, syncopated waters doesn't produce good hits when I look at DuckDuckGo.
You might try Google Bard or something like that.
Yeah.
The origin of syncopation in American popular music. Let's see. Well, this is just in music, not with the waters. Source of controversy. Oh, like this is where did it begin?
I think we're going down a rabbit hole we don't need to, because I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. All I know is that it was a big deal in the 50s or 60s when they were able to control the water fountains and program them to syncopated with the music that's driving it.
Sam, are you aware?
But I don't know
your camera fell
in advance or if there was real-time syncopation.
Is Sam aware that his camera has fallen?
It's underneath my microphone right now while I'm trying to do some
Okay.
Google searches.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just glad you're aware of it. I'm just making sure you know. Yeah, but the idea that you're talking about, Barry, of synchronizing syncopations, if you will, of there's a lot of projection mapping that's going on, and they're using sound to do the projection mapping, and the synchronizing of the projection is the next level of just shooting water out of a fountain.
Dancing Waters is 1928. A water fountain show in Berlin had the Dancing Waters at the Bauhaus Resi Berlin in the late 1920s. So, but they didn't call it syncopated. They called it Dancing Waters when it first appeared. And somewhere along the line, they introduced the technical term syncopated around 1950s or so.
Well, what you're putting out with ragtime is really, playing with syncopation quite a bit. And syncopation almost is the non-synchronization of music. So it's still based on time, but it's an offset that sort of adds a sort of mood to the music.
Would you say, Sam, it doesn't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing?
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this. Oh, let me share. This is slightly different off topic, but let me share something for you guys. Where am I? Okay.
Yeah. So often music is composed to go with the motion of nature as opposed to the other way around.
Okay, you guys see this?
Hang on a second, I gotta go back to that. Yeah, you're outside in the snow.
This is 7-degree weather right now.
It's not a
that's
lot.
cold.
It's about an inch. What last
year? Yeah, it's not a lot, but it's cold.
Yeah.
Sam, you want to see
Kinda
two
cool.
seasons in one property?
I got that here too.
Do you have that? Like the hillside is just blocking everything.
Yeah.
We've got this hillside just keeps one side of the property frozen, the other side is melted. It's here, I'll share.
Well,
So if
the
you
North
see-
Atlantic Island doesn't have any snow at all, so it's very similar There's only
Yeah.
snow down here on the southern tip.
This is all melted, and then this is all frozen.
Ah,
Yeah.
nice.
Bellagio,
So-
Las Vegas. Yeah, ChatGPT knows about Bellagio, Dubai fountain. Gave a couple of examples of water fountains that keep time to the music. But it doesn't actually give, I guess it sort of evolved slowly over, even goes back to the 17th and 18th centuries, synchronizing water movement to music.
Yeah. Well, you know what's really interesting, Barry, is they're synchronizing the actual actions in video games to large language models and changing the game is dynamic now, where you go to a non-player character and they have their own script that changes, and that is now being synchronized with the actor so they can do dynamic actions in the video game.
Yeah, so instead of a scripted NPC, it's nominally scripted, but with some freedom of perturbations around it.
But when that, so in real time, when that perturbation is made, it changes the actions of
Right.
the, so they can go to the refrigerator, and depending on what you tell them is what they pull out. In other words, it's a big breakthrough in the video game technology of,
Basically have a parameter in the model where the parameter can take on arbitrary values.
yeah, I
If-
can post it up. Let me see if
Yeah.
I just, it's, I don't know if you find that interesting. I'm not sure if that is interesting to you, but
mean,
to me it's
Object, you can
fascinating.
have object as a generic class, and then you can instantiate the object with an apple, an orange, a banana, a cup of coffee. So yeah, you can easily parameter that can take on different characteristics.
Yeah.
The classical juggling three different objects, a knife and an apple and an, I don't know, whatever, and the knife slices the apple while you're juggling it. That's a classic.
Am I
NVIDIA
sharing my screen? Is
Yeah.
it, can you see it?
NVIDIA Ace hybrid AI.
Yeah, the company I think is out of India. They're called Convey, and they're using it to the language model does the text to speech, so it makes the lip sync work on the character,
Oh, that's cool.
and then it starts with the speech to text. So what you're saying to that gets written into the language model. In other words, they're using ChatGPT inside of the game, but not just for the voice and them talking. Still, it's the actions that they take are being rewritten with ray tracing.
Yeah, so basically cartoonish rep, representation of the storyline.
But not cartoonish. Like it's, you really see them. So the example they use, the guy is behind a counter at a sushi restaurant or at a ramen restaurant,
Photorealistic.
photorealistic everything, but then you say to him, hey, how's it going? And he tries to talk about the storyline of the game, but then they added another character that starts talking. So the three of them are having a conversation, and one guy says, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, I just got my new job. And the guy behind the counter says, oh, let me break out the good stuff. So
Yeah.
you can say to him, oh, wait, I don't want to pay for that good stuff. And he'll go back behind the counter and get a different bottle of something that's like, in other words, it's starting to get very interactive. This is why I'm excited about this, is the dynamic aspect could create worlds that have never existed in video games before, where they're never the same game twice.
I knew a family that could do shtick where the teenage son would position himself behind his mother, and he would use his hands as if they were her arms, and as she spoke, he would do the gesture. The whole idea was, can he gesture while his mother spoke, extemporaneously, so that the gesturing was both realistic but also comical.
Yeah. I think Sam had his hand up when he was walking. I don't know if you saw that, Barry.
I did.
I think what's going to be fascinating, and it's sooner rather than later, is that now with Oculus 3 and the rumored Oculus Quest 4 out, they're supposedly much better than the 2 and the 1. I don't know if you got one yet, Josh. But
No, I still have the old one.
which one, the 1 or the 2?
I have the 2.
I have a 2 also. And I've had it for a couple of years, and really, I haven't found anything to do with it. But I've heard the 3 now is a huge leap above and beyond the 2. Like now the whole visual area is now like, edge to edge. And if you couple that with what you just described about dynamic generation of scenes and interactivity, and now you add the Oculus 3/4/ other devices like Apple's to the full immersion experience, we're getting pretty damn close to the Matrix.
Yeah.
Not only are we getting, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if I mentioned this to Joshua before. I think I only told it to Sam. I had an out-of-town visitor who was here on a project, and just before he left town, he came over to my house to show me the project he was working on. He had, I don't know if it was an Oculus or a different brand, but it was a goggles that you wore on your head, and you had these things in your hand that you control them. But the project was to recreate the original moon landing, the original Eagle landing. So the first version is you're standing on the surface of the moon, and it's a 3 surround sound, 3, surround, and you see the Eagle come in and lands right in front of you. That's the first version. And then the second version is, there's a ladder on the Eagle where they came off the ladder. And at the top of the ladder is like a platform. It's called the front porch. And so the second version, you're on the front porch. And you're sitting there on the front porch as the Eagle comes in to land on the moon. And so you're wearing this thing, and it's just absolutely amazing. We did it right here in my kitchen. And I'll tell you, and if you physically walk, on the floor that you're standing on, your view will change. I could actually walk around the lander and look on, front, the back of it. And it was just very, you felt like if you looked up in the sky, you'd see the real sky. You'd see the correct sky. The terrain was correct. It was all based on telemetry data. So you actually had the true appearance of the lander, the photorealistic terrain, the photorealistic stars in the sky, and physically walk through the space.
Yeah.
But Barry, we didn't land on the moon, right?
Well,
stop.
People don't think I didn't land on the moon. Personally, I didn't. and the last Green didn't either, hasn't yet, won't.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a famous poem by Thich Nhat Hanh after 9/11, and it's May We Know Peace, and it's one of my favorites. It's I am a pigeon sitting on the ledge of a building, and the plane has just crashed through, and hot, stuff is spewing out in papers. May I know peace. I am the terrorist, holding a knife to the person. May I know peace, so on and so forth. All the different, I am a child waiting for my daddy to come home from work that day. May I know peace. And the reason I'm bringing that up is the multimodal aspect, like Heiner says, like multimodal, looking at it from all directions. We've had the ability to do narratives and stories and maybe even make clever editing and films, but we've never had the ability to play a situation where you are every character in a scene. And we've never been able to tell narratives that way. I think it's going to be a game changer in our psyche.
Yeah, Rashomon was I think the most famous experiment where the same story was told from the perspective of 4 different characters. The Rashomon. Do you know about the Rashomon movie?
Kurosawa.
Yeah,
he's the director. Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah. So I never saw it, but I know about it. It's the fact that whatever the story was, it's repeated from the perspective of 4 different witnesses.
Right. He started that genre in film, but can you imagine doing a scene and then all of a sudden you are the worm on the ground watching people run and then squish, you're dead?
Well, certainly the idea is not new, but instantiating it for the audience. So you need the virtual reality for the audience to be immersed in the scene as opposed to a distant witness. Because where the camera is the witness on your behalf, but you don't control what the camera's doing. You're just watching what the camera's doing.
But I'm saying, imagine you're in a schoolroom, a classroom 30 years from now,
Mhm.
and you're explaining physics, and then you tell a narrative, and then you go into each perspective of, okay, now you're the raindrop, and here we are in the cloud. We're condensing, we're falling. And I've seen beautiful animations of these things, but you put on your 3D goggles and you are the raindrop falling, looking around. Go
How
ahead,
you
Sam.
electron in the p orbital?
Yeah.
Magic School Bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a PBS series, wasn't it?
That is a great children's series where the school bus and the teacher go to take the perspective of exactly the raindrop or the worm or the sewer or the planets. Did a good job of that, in its day.
Well, didn't Neil deGrasse Tyson reboot the Carl Sagan series and do
Yeah.
that sort of thing?
Cosmos, yeah.
Yeah, he did Cosmos something like 25 years after Sagan did it.
Well, he did it twice. Neil deGrasse did one layer of Cosmos and then he did another one. He rebooted it twice.
Well, there might have been two segments of it or whatever. What's the word I'm looking for? Two series. I don't know. Sam.
I think this whole theme, and Josh, I think, was describing how you reconstruct an entire immersive experience. Imagine going to a football game where you got like 50,000 attendees, and usually every one of them has a very complex CPU called the phone. It's got a bunch of sensors, it's got cameras. So imagine putting together 50,000 perspectives of audio and video so you can actually recreate with extreme high fidelity what's going on in that stadium. And imagine then standing right next to the running back, watching him get the handoff from the quarterback and experiencing that play from within the play.
Yeah, you get it on the
Yeah.
shoulder of the player. Yeah.
Or a soccer match or a volleyball match, whatever you
Have
imagine,
you
right?
have you used your Oculus to watch a sporting event, Sam?
Actually, ping pong and tennis are the only ones that I actually found. I didn't find many others.
I watched a
Also,
professional basketball
beach
game with it. Yeah, when I watched the professional basketball game, I found myself distracted by the fidelity, and I didn't like it because I'm used to watching it from far away on the regular angle that they show a TV screen for. I could see the guy was sick and he was wiping his nose of his snot onto his uniform. And I was like, this is terrible. I don't want to know this. I don't want to see. That's not what I want to see when I'm watching a game. It was too high fidelity.
But
So I was on the sidelines.
sitting up in the stands of the Stanford Stadium, and you're so far away, I couldn't even make out the football. The football would be hand carried or thrown. I go, I don't know where the football is. I can't track it. It's too small, too far away, moving too fast for me to track it. I couldn't follow the play.
That was my experience with hockey. I saw it from far away and I couldn't even see the puck.
Like, where's the puck? And I hardly ever watched fast moving sports because I simply couldn't parse the scenes in real time. There's just too much happening. And so three-ring circle.
But nowadays they have these overlays and they'll replay it and you'll get to see so much information. It's like, I would love to see a cricket match with the overlay of the trajectory of the spinning of the I don't know what they call the thing they throw.
Yeah, and they overlay the yard lines right on the field. That's pretty amazing stuff.
There is more high quality analysis of sporting events than there is political.
You're breaking up, Sam. We're not getting continuous audio.
Oh, that would be unfortunate.
Say that.
Oh, you're coming back.
I haven't really changed.
Say the last.
Anyway, I said, it is unfortunate that we get much more high quality analysis and visualization of sporting events than we do analysis of political debates or political discourse or even judicial events. Imagine having the same quality of visualization, of, drawing out visually the lines of reasoning and logic and debate and argument and evidence, and just being able to, okay, so this is unsubstantiated, that's a lie, this has been verified, this guy's, got 99.7% lies, this guy's got, 20% lies, this guy's got 2% lies, just sort of being able to visualize something that's much more socially impactful to me than a sporting play where a guy, sort of just missed the bucket because it bounced this way and he just whatever. Okay. So the investment in analysis and visualization tools for sporting events far exceeds the quality of analysis and visualization for justice and political discourse. And that to me is the sad aspect. Over.
What's interesting is the amount of revenge that works its way into politics, vengeance and revenge. I mean, Trump himself says, I am your revenge. Wasn't that his quote? One of the talks. And not Hamas, but the Houthis are saying, this is vengeance. Their politics is expressly vengeance.
Well, in order to do what Sam's talking about, you would have to take a different snapshot, meaning they can get the sporting event 3 seconds later. The political event would take 3 weeks later. So you'd have to do
but
a
if you had a lot of preparation prior to the event, because you already know, what Haley says, you already know what Christie says, you already know what Trump said, you already know what's going on. So you could actually just tack on what's being said in real time.
You remember the Daily Show where they would have groups of editors running through film. Like, there's a lot more pundits and people in the political arena that have larger groups of people behind the scenes, fact checking, running through. It's starting to get there, is what I'm saying. Is you wait a little longer, the large language model will go through the information quickly and be able to do it in real time. But you're right, I haven't seen that.
That's the point of optimism, actually. For all these language models to say this is bullshit, and just be able to exhaustively illustrate why that's bullshit. Whereas for a human to do that would take a much more time.
There was a lot of clips of Trump saying X in this one episode, and then they'd cut to him saying not X, in another occasion. And these multiple occasions where he would say the opposite of what he had said before, flip-flopping like crazy.
Well, for that reason, they're allowed to lie. I'm hoping that the new politics, they can't get away with that because someone will have a machine. Like you saw that came out of CES, this new little rabbit AI. Have you guys both seen this? It's blowing up. No. It's like a little mini GPT in your pocket for $200, some Chinese company made. Okay. But the kids are going to be using those. This type of device is the new iPod, if you will. So it has a camera, it flips both forward and back, and it has a little screen. It's very, infancy at this moment of what it could do.
iPhone already.
What's that?
Doesn't your iPhone already do that? You can have GPT on your iPhone with your camera already. That's
right.
It's the form factor of the screen and the camera.
Smaller.
It's not smaller. It's more, how can I say, it's using less. I think the big change in computing is using less energy to run. The phone has to run so much. Right. It's using so much battery life. This is just made for the language model.
I see.
So imagine there are language models just dedicated to a website like opensecrets.org, and a language model that's just dedicated to the back end of government that publishes all of the notes of every meeting every day in real time. So I think, Sam, you're onto something with the ability to do that type of political coverage. Like, have you guys seen the HBO special, The Circus? Do you know this one?
I don't have HBO.
It's every election cycle, they do a reality TV show from the people that are traveling with the politicians. So you get to see their downtime in between the rallies, and it's a new perspective of why they said what they said at that moment in time at that Iowa caucus, because of you get to see the behind. It's like a reality TV show behind the scenes of political runs for office.
Mike a couple of days ago, disparaging Christy, what's her name? Haley, saying she hasn't got a chance. So yeah, when people are candid, when they don't know they're being recorded, then you really find out how they're fork tongue they are, how they say one thing in public and another thing in private. And that's why people don't trust politicians. They're not candid.
Yeah. The Andrew Yang, the 2020 election, what changed in my perspective was I got to see a group of YouTubers canvassing in Iowa in the cold, and to see the real-time reaction when you ring a doorbell and say, hey, who are you voting for? And to see in real time the next day 30 videos of people canvassing, it told a very different story than what the media was telling me of what's going on the streets.
Yeah. Yeah. The media tells stories that are coherent but not true. And
not always coherent.
Prefabricated, maybe.
Try to make them coherent, but that tends to sacrifice the accuracy, because real life isn't coherent. Real life is incoherent, it's chaotic.
The 2016 election, this has changed my view on politics. Is everyone was watching a speech by Hillary Clinton that was filled in the audience, and it was lively, and she's the front runner, and Bernie's nothing, and he's, people are throwing cheers at his rallies, and they're terrible people, but Hillary's the candidate. And I went on live stream, and a friend of mine turned the camera, and there was no one in Hillary's audience. And then I went on live stream to Bernie's audience in Ventura, California. And then I went to I walked into my parents' bedroom. They're watching, MSNBC or whatever, CNN, and they were showing that perspective that was just a false narrative. And that just broke my heart to see the mainstream media lying so blatantly. And I told my parents, and they didn't believe me. They thought I was lying. So they gaslit me and said, no, you're full of shit. We can see all the people there. That's not true.
Yeah, you can trust.
Oh, Bernie was definitely taken down by the DNC itself, and that was evil.
Travesty.
Yep.
But
and
that
admitted.
Show you that if you're a systems thinker, you're going to be screwed by the mainstream.
Or if you have access to Periscope or any live, like whenever something goes down in the news media, I try to run to the internet and see who's there in person. And I'm not listening to their narrative. I'm watching their video. And then I'm piecing together, that multimodal perspective of as many different people on the ground. And it helped in the BLM crisis. I got to see a lot of things that they didn't show on TV. Yeah. So I think that's going to change as we move forward. It was like Sam was saying, there's too much information to process too fast of every clip of every politician speaking.
Absolutely.
Just fact check.
And it's fair to scheisse anyway. Horse dookie. That's a great word. German word for horse dookie is fair to scheisse.
Yeah. And politicians are good at spinning. They're good at the word is. What was that famous Bill Clinton thing?
Depends what the word is means.
Yeah.
Which
is why I'm studying, the ontologies, the meaning of the words and the context, as well as the placement is so important. It's like, anyway, I'll stop. I don't like to talk about politics.
Isn't that why Eric said there's a form of language that tries to avoid the word is? Didn't he say that a few weeks ago?
He might have said it, but is that true? I don't know.
And the word it is also a big one. And the word the
vague pronouns drive me up the wall. Pronouns without antecedents, pronouns with vague antecedents.
That's not a fault of the pronoun. That's a fault of the user.
I know. There's a person in the, there's a clerk in our fix-it shop who has so many pronouns, and she'll refer to this. How do I fix this? I go, this is a pronoun with no antecedent.
Oh. Oh, you know what triggered me yesterday? I gotta find the reference, but some teacher was quoted as saying to their students that identifying as straight was offensive.
Identifying
Some
as
teacher actually tried to say that to her student class, that, oh, you identifying as straight, that's offensive.
to her, but
Gotta
not to
find that reference.
Oh, no, there's a whole group of new people on this planet that believe that gender is so fluid that it is offensive to identify as one gender.
well, certainly I think gender characteristics are very fluid. You can have masculine and feminine characteristics intermixed in arbitrary combinations. A person can be very macho or very caring or very empathetic without regard to their whether they're a male or female.
So that in
That's correct.
itself is going to violate
Yeah.
their speech practice.
Oh yeah, I mean there are lots of examples where there's an assumed gender of the character, and that's where they use these names like Pat and Chris, where you don't, where the given name can be either gender, and you make up these stories, and they only make sense if you realize that the person in question is not the gender you thought they were.
Yeah, that type of fluidity bleeds over into ambiguity, which
Right.
bleeds over into misunderstanding, which goes back to your baloney detection we were talking about the other day. Is how do you know if it's true if you've never defined what's actually happened?
Yeah. But that's the problem with language, is that there's only a finite number of words in the language, and there's an uncountable number of scenarios that need to be described, and words are inadequate to characterize something.
Yeah,
But they're
finite
still
words
useful.
with infinite meaning. Yeah,
Let me
they're
make
That
very
doesn't mean
useful.
don't use words.
Well, that's why I want to go back to the Bohmian dialogue, because if there's infinite meaning behind the words, there's infinite conversations to be happened to dynamically evolve the conversation. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I think for me, the interesting aspect of that is that a word in a dictionary
Oh, there's a group
appears to apply universally,
of 11
but in a conversation, there's typically a context. Okay, and in computer science, you would call that a namespace. In other words, the
Yep.
word complete in a business context, referring to a job, has one notion. In a psychotherapeutic, counseling context, the word complete means something else. And in relationships, you use that word very differently than you do in a technical sense or in a scientific sense. Okay, so the notion of namespaces being where this word has a specific meaning is lost when you put things in a generic universal dictionary. And Bohmian dialogue is intended to not expose, but give direct acknowledgement to the need for clarification, the need for that context setting, that namespace clarification. And then much more than that. That's not the only thing Bohmian dialogue does, but it's a necessary component of it. So when people hear a sentence and immediately bristle at it, says they're not even aware of all the assumptions that they're making. They're not even curious or leaning into, okay, so in what context could that statement be plausible and or true? That question in and of itself is a necessary starting point, in my view, towards Bohmian dialogue.
I
So
agree.
a quick reaction, a quick negative reaction, even a quick positive reaction is a non-Bohmian reaction, and it's too assumptive. Over.
Yeah.
Have we all three of us read The Wholeness and the Implicate Order, the book from David Bohm?
It's hard to find a copy of it. I finally have a copy of it. And
Okay,
I've got
cool.
started with it. In fact, I've got 4 of his books now. It's hard to track down a lot of his books. Very difficult. But yes, I've started 4 of his books, and I'm in the middle of 4 of his books. And can't say that I've picked one up recently, but it's been weeks.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be fun to read the first 2 chapters of that book because it goes over the languaging.
I haven't read that book.
In fact, my very good friend Dino Karabeg at the University of Oslo is a big proponent of that particular book and how it informs his research.
Yeah, it definitely shaped my thinking. I think that brought me down a large. I was trying to understand what holograms are. So going to holographic museums and trying to really learn. There's two types of holograms, and it's not the same. There's pretend holograms and actual fractal holograms, that the smallest amount of information creates all the information of the whole. And then there's just like pretending to show something in 3 dimensions, like a curved mirror. And then of course there's what is it called? Lenticular. I don't know if you've ever seen where that's not even a hologram, but people call it a hologram. So the word hologram in the 90s was very ambiguous. And I was trying to understand, and it was David Bohm's work that helped me to really see, the multimodal from 2 different places of, here's the object, and you can use this as a metaphor for everything. You have the object and you have the light hitting the object, but where you shine the light is going to change, much like the cover of Gödel Escher Bach. How it's the shadows, the shadow space, the non-defined space is going to change. And in a conversation, like you said, when you use acronyms, Sam, it drives me crazy, because I want the pronoun of the context of the acronym, meaning if you say KPT, political KPT versus computer science KPT versus business, all the different contexts of the acronym. So to me, my brain jumbles all those acronyms because I transfer to multimodal as a polymath from different disciplines of books I've read and different. It drives me crazy. I go insane. From theology, like there's so many acronyms in theology. Oh my gosh. And physics, and yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, to me, when people who have not previously met first meet, that familiarization, that teasing out of, okay, so in what context do you use certain terms or phrases or acronyms? And I do the same. That understanding of mutual context setting is such a necessary piece of engagement and relationship building that, to me, it seems nonsensical to at least, acknowledge that that's necessary. And people who immediately meet somebody and make a quick decision about, oh, I don't like this person, or I don't like the way this person thinks, is making a lot of assumptions.
There was just a story this morning about, does your opinion on the Emmys depend on whether you like or dislike the characters in the story, in the series? And supposedly when you're judging the Emmys of some TV series, you should be influenced whether you like or dislike any of the characters or the actors who play the characters.
Yeah, a lot of people can't.
Yeah. So I don't like that series because there was a character I don't like. So I don't like the whole series.
So if I may finish that thought, in business, when teams get together, there's this notion of a 4-step process. I've referred to it before, the storming, the norming, what is it? Storming. Yeah, there's a storming, forming, performing, but I think performing might be the 4th step. I forget there's another one. Norming. Storming, norming, performing. Anyway, so that way of setting the context for how teams form acknowledges that each of them comes with their own context and language. In fact, I mentioned this in Dictopedia. Dictopedia, which I've referred to now for a few years, is an attempt to really make explicit the fact that we travel with our own language. And as I meet you, I need to get familiar with your Dictopedia. You ideally would get familiar with my Dictopedia, understand our namespaces and our nuances for various different terms. Yeah, there we go. Storming, forming, norming, and performing. Yes, right. And then only after all of that context setting and mutual alignment has happened, then you sort of minimize the disagreements and the misunderstandings that can happen, and then communications become much more efficient and meaningful and actionable.
So the prerequisite before the actual conversation can begin to solve the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a show on Broadway, a reprisal of Sweeney Todd, and the character who plays Sweeney Todd in the current version just talking exactly about that: storming, forming, norming, performing. How they put together the concept of the reprisal, how they formed this particular edition of the play, how they worked everything out so that they have the the norming, and then the final. He talked about all those stages of learning to play this character, Sweeney Todd, in this reprisal, and I think he played it for most of a year before this particular reprisal. But Stephen Sondheim died, I guess, a couple of years ago. So now
this is a reminder. Says Sam, take minutes.
So a lot of the Sondheim plays that didn't do well on their first appearance are now in reprisals, and they're getting standing room only audiences because he's been dead for a couple of years, and this is the last hurrah. I had saw Sweeney Todd in the late 70s. I didn't realize it was a Sondheim musical at the time, or I'd forgotten if I knew that.
You've mentioned it a couple times. You're making me want to go and check this out because it sounds interesting.
Yeah. Well, like I say, Sondheim was quite the prolific playwright. He worked on the story, he worked on the music, he worked on the lyrics, and very extremely versatile. But not everything that he did was a hit the first time around. A lot of them languished and didn't do well until they were brought back in reprisals. That's a funny word, reprisal, because it has two contexts. Go ahead, Sam.
I'm going to go back a few minutes and riff on this whole recreation and immersive experience theme. One of the things I set up a couple of years ago, let me back up. I am a big fan of the science fiction series called the Lensman series by Edward E. Smith. And it is probably the grandest quote unquote space opera I have ever come across in my entire life. It's about these two civilizations, one in one galaxy, another in another galaxy, who see millennia in advance that these two galaxies are on a collision course. But both civilizations are already advanced by that stage. And one is aware of the other, but the second is not aware of the first. So this whole story arc takes place all the way from when they see this collision about to happen to when it is actually happening, and the minions of that second galaxy, who are all subject to this second civilization, come into conflict with the, let's say, the offspring of the first galaxy, who are all basically seeded from that very advanced first civilization, and the anticipated crises that happen. Now, because I'm such a fan of that series, it's a 6 or 7 book series, I've often fantasized about creating actual movies from this book series. Strangely enough, it's not been turned into a movie. So one of the things I was setting up, and I've actually started a website, but I haven't gotten very far with it, is to fantasize that we could group author the script for a series of movies based on these books. And somebody would worry about this character, somebody would actually take on the worry of that character, somebody would worry about this particular scene, somebody would worry about what the spaceships looked like, somebody would worry about this lens, which was part of the series. So if all the fans got together, imagine all the Star Wars fans got together and group authored a whole alternate series of scripts around that universe, and what stories could evolve from that. That's what I was fantasizing in my own mind. But now, think about how that could be done with or without the assistance of these GPTs or LLMs, but also now taking advantage of the immersive, multimodal scene creation capabilities that are, like here or just around the corner. Whole storytelling genre is going to be vastly advanced by all of these things. And it's just going to be amazing to see in the next few months / years. I'm hoping that, I can see, but, what had been a fantasy for many years is going to seem mundane in a few months when this becomes so real. And we can all have our version of it. We can all have our own twist on it, for example. Anyway, that's a little fantasy that's probably come to its time and probably been exposed as OBE, overtaken by events.
It could also be an infinite supply of schlock. You know what?
It's always going to be that, Barry. It's always going to be that. Okay.
Already, people who publish best-selling books on Amazon, within a month, there's a slew of rip-off books, which essentially with the same content generated by AI, and they're schlock. And the original authors look at these things and they say, it's basically, a paraphrase of what I said, but it's badly written.
Yeah, but it's like that helix you were talking about. It's schlock, and then it's going up, and then it folds back. In other words, it takes the pendulum to swing both ways to get to the good stuff again.
Yeah. So eventually, all the schlock falls by the wayside, and the classical version, the norming, performing, excellent, world-class version survives, and all the schlocky versions, fall by the wayside. Versions of the classic plays, are forgotten, and the canonical version survives. But it can take a generation for something to be perfected to where there's the canonical version of the story.
Are either you guys following the space that is generative video, not the generative like DALL-E, Stable Diffusion?
Yeah, that's the
Pika
multimodal
Labs
stuff that I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah, I'm saying that if you're following that space, it's really frustrating trying to tell stories with the current technology because of the artifacts that are created. But like you said, Sam, it's probably about 12 months away from being able to tell a 2-minute scene, but they're utilizing camera angles. So you're able to tell the language models, I want to shoot it from this angle. And the more that this technology puts the camera angle, it's starting to work. In other words, you'll be able to get the visual that when you read that story out of your head. And I like the fact that you're asking for multiple people to work on it with you, because it's that culmination of all the visuals that will create the best story.
I mean, think about
it's going to be a lot of fun.
Think about ABC acquired World of Sports with Rune Arledge. They would have 18 cameras on the field, and somebody had to pick which camera is going to be the on-air camera for the next 5 seconds, and being able to switch. So you're covering the action on the field optimally at all times. That takes a level of skill that's just world class. And
that was my buddy's job. My buddy did that for sporting events.
And teamwork.
It's really hard. He told me what he did, because the broadcast, the hardest part is the signal going out from the truck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because you got setting up to a satellite or whatever, or microwave down or something. And if you lose that signal, you're screwed. So
that world is fascinating, of covering live events where he's got 40 different 40 different angles, and
Desi Arnaz pioneered the 3-camera scene where he had the center camera and 2 left, and they all cross shots. So the one here shot that way and the one here shot that way. He pioneered the 3-camera system of shooting sitcoms.
Well, Barry, I can show you the camera I bought 2 years ago. Has a full 180 lens on one side, a 180 lens on the other side. So I'm shooting in 360.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it uses AI to take out the stick that I'm holding the camera on. So it looks like it's floating. So I can look like a drone floating around space with 360-degree view. And that's
Yeah.
that's old technology.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, photography has come a long ways since it was invented, 100 and some odd years ago. But yeah, I mean, even in the Toastmasters meeting where I've got a podium camera and 2 room cameras, picking which camera to spotlight as the meeting progresses in real time. I mean, it's not as complicated, obviously, as wide world sports, but it's the same idea. Like, what camera is giving you the information that the audience wants to see?
Yeah.
And is it a wide shot, or is it a zoomed in shot? Is it a panning shot? Following the action. Tricky.
I know we're coming to the end of the meeting. My closing is to allow for the evolution of the human input system of the brain to take in the amount of information we're about to feed it in the next 10 years. I think it's going to be a huge cocooning evolution of people having to multimodally take in that much information that they've never had to in the history of humanity.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that began about 400 years ago, where the amount of information that one acquired through learning exceeded the amount of information in the DNA. Up until about 400 years ago, there was more information in the DNA than there was accumulated information from lifetime learning.
Oh.
Sam.
I'm going to introduce a thing that I'm riffing off of what Josh just said, okay, which is for most of human history, we've been on this monotonic path towards each human having access to more and more information in order to live an optimal life, right? So today, as you just pointed out, Barry, we are inundated, right? Access to information is now crippling us,
yes,
as opposed to enabling us.
Yes.
So with the new technologies, I think we're about to go the other direction.
So
We're now winnowing away the volume of information we need in order to optimize our life, because we can actually leverage other technologies. To say, of all these tens of terabits of information that's coming at me every day, we can now have these smart assistants, tools, bots, models, reasoners that say, okay, Sam, for your life and what you're doing, you don't need this 9.9 trillion terabits of it. I'll winnow it down to, here's what you got to do at 10 o'clock. Here's what you got to call at 8 o'clock. And, here's a few little articles that are pertinent to your interests. And here's another little skill paper that might help you with your violin music, et cetera, et cetera. And then that I can trust because I've built up a relationship with these tools where I know what they're doing for me. So I think we're on this interesting alternate path of really focusing instead of receiving.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting alternate model for how we're going about IT. Over.
Yeah, smart editing. You remember when Newton Minow characterized television as a vast wasteland, and now the internet is a vast wasteland similar to TV. And of course, TV was funded and edited, and you had world-class producers. The internet is not world-class. It's just everybody can produce anything, and it's a vast wasteland to the nth power. And we need smart editing to winnow out the cream of the crop. You're not seeing the cream of the crop.
Oh, we were talking, Barry, what's the part of your brain that filters out all the sound that's around you and you were talking about processing a lot of that in your dream state.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, what do you pay attention to, and what is impinging on your senses that is evidently not relevant, but it still leaves an impression? And so the little things that you didn't parse in real time are floating around, and you can process them in your dream sleep to see if there's any relevant information there.
What's the name for that process?
Scavenging. It's like garbage collection in computer. It's not garbage collection. It's scavenging stuff that you didn't throw away, but you didn't keep either. It's sort of scavenging the unattended component. of
Do we have language for that? Because I've heard it used in metaphors of computers. I've heard it used in metaphors of neuroscience or brain. But
jargon for it. But you know, when I learned the term garbage collecting in computers, I thought, how about cousin collecting, where you've got things which look similar, they're like cousins, but they're distinct, and you go, but there's an underlying pattern that's common to all of them. So cousin collecting would be finding the pattern that's recurring, but not identical in each. So you're finding a pattern that's present, but unappreciated. And so if you have two or three episodes which are strangely reminiscent of each other, but in different contexts, and can you say, gee, I heard the same, I saw the same, and I felt the same thing in different modes, and it's a salient pattern.
It's a form of inference.
Say again?
It's a form of inference.
Yeah, that two things which are seemingly unrelated are really echoes of the same underlying phenomenon. And so you can recognize the underlying pattern because you see it echoed in these different modalities. So they have those same, they all resemble the same pattern.
well, the best phrase I heard from you, Barry, is that phrase "bearing accurate witness."
Yeah.
And in the collection of data of the human consciousness, there's they're trying to study how we bear accurate witness, but the accuracy is a question of how much can you filter
Right.
at what point in order to receive the accurate.
Yeah.
Like, how much noise is in the system is the question.
Walk into the forest and you see a lot of trees, but there aren't that many species of trees. Can you recognize that this tree and that tree are different, but they resemble each other because they have the same shape and color of bark and the same shape and color of leaves, and in fact they're the same species, they're cousins. And
yeah,
then those two pair of trees are also cousins, but they're different species. So can you recognize species as opposed to specific trees? That this tree is there and that tree is there, but they're, you don't relate them as having something as a common blueprint. So recognizing the blueprint, that this house and that house are built from the same blueprint, even though they're different houses. That house is from a different blueprint. That's a Cape Cod and that's a salt box and that's a, whatever the name of the architecture is. Recognizing classes that have the common underlying model or blueprint. So recognizing generic models. I think in your sleep, you can collect models or blueprints or patterns. Even though they're different instances of the same pattern.
And it's amazing that our brain wants to turn that into a story. Like I'm curious, like more dream studies of how people dream. I'm sure there's some people that don't turn all that information into a story, but I've yet to meet those people.
Well, yes. So if every case is a special case, and no two cases are related, then you basically have to memorize a whole lot of data, because this stop sign on this street and that stop sign on that street have nothing to do with each other. So you have to separately record this stop sign and that stop sign, and not say, oh, there's a generic thing called a stop sign. And if I can see any one stop sign, I can abstract the generic stop sign. I don't say, but that one has a pock mark there and that one has a scratch there. You can throw that away as irrelevant because the meaning is the same no matter where it's located.
Yep. And that's why I'm so fascinated with the way the Tesla car is trying to learn how to drive, is they were labeling everything and they realized that didn't work. They're going to get nowhere. So they started letting the computer infer by what is actually happening on these different drives.
Put the salient parameters of the model and throw away the part of the model is just noise. So throw what's noise and what's data. And what's noise you throw away, and what's data, you find the simplest model that captures the real data, and you don't include the noise that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think that tuning of the dial is the new paradigm of how we're tuning the dial collectively and taking out the biases of, you know, I like this frequency, so I'm going to stay here, refining it, like getting into the note, the inside of the notes. So it's not just A or B, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, the quavers, the tiniest amounts of data, tuning into that and really understanding those different, I like one of my favorite pictures right now is a picture of the Fermi telescope, 10 years of time lapse in 7 different frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum, looking out at our galaxy, and how much data you can get from the gamma spectrum, you know, gamma rays versus X-rays. It's really different data. It's not the same data.
The difference that makes a difference. This is what one of the definitions of information. This one I think is due to Gregory Bateson, is the difference that makes a difference. So my nephew has twin daughters, and they look alike, but they're different. And how do I tell them apart? So I can tell that they're clearly twins, but can I identify the difference that distinguishes Roxy from Gabby? The answer is no, I can't. To my mind, Roxy and Gabby are indistinguishable, but clearly you need to be able to distinguish them if you're their parent or their siblings or their teacher or whatever. So the difference that makes a difference is what's a pattern and what's an instance of a pattern that's distinct from the generic pattern.
Yeah.
What's the doppelganger?
Well,
on Facebook, you have these identity theft doppelgangers that pretend to be somebody else. And can I distinguish the doppelganger, the faker, from the real guy? Get rid of the doppelganger who's impersonating the real guy. The difference that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. In that case, it's the URL that's different between the two. I can tell which URL is the real deal, which one is the ersatz imitation.
Yep. I apologize. I got to go check on the little one because I told her I'd be back at 10.
All right. Well, yeah, it's 10 minutes. No, it's 20 minutes past the hour. So we went long.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to
Yeah.
say before we call it a day? You're muted, Sam.
Not for today, but I may have 1 or 2 questions that might be posed tomorrow.
Yeah. So we'll meet at the same time tomorrow and maybe be a little bit more structured. All righty. Everybody have a
All
good day.
Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Cheers.